Hello, and we are going to start our deck tech of what I am calling Esper Nonsense. This deck is all built around drawing cards and bouncing Dovin's Acuity. So, card draw. That's what all of these are for. This is our primary main deck win condition. The only other win condition this deck has is Mastermind's Acquisition. So the idea is we're just going to bounce Dovin's Acuity as many times as possible and draw through the entire deck, slowly killing off our opponent's stuff, gaining a bunch of life off of these and the Acuity. We have a couple of Wraths if we need them. Negate is our one just in case we need to make sure we resolve one of our win conditions, or if we have it at the beginning of the game, it's just something we can throw out to have a little bit of interaction and get our opponent playing on their heels. Now, in terms of win conditions, that's what our sideboard is for. We have some hate cards in here, and then just some ways to win the game that we can choose through depending on what our opponent is playing. Um, this is a best of one only deck. Do not attempt to play this in best of two. Anyone you play against will just board in enchantment hate, getting rid of this, and removing our ability to accrue value over the game, or they will board in more counter spells. And we only have 4 cards that are actually relevant, so if those get countered, we lose 100% of the time. In terms of matchups, our best matchup is easily the Gates deck. Against Gates, it's really easy to. You have 7 removal spells, they have 8 to 16 threats in their entire 60. It's not that hard to get rid of each of those threats. Um, Gate Colossus is annoying. We generally just want to dig for Vraska's Contempt to answer it. Gatebreaker Ram is really easy to get rid of with Cast Down, and then Murder is just, it's what it does. As needed, it will kill something. Ideally, this Murder would be replaced with a 4th Acuity, but I do not have one. Um, our worst matchup is Mono Red. They have the ability to just get underneath our life gain and avoid our removal with enough burn to close out the game. If we draw enough life gain and a few removal spells, we can steal games from mono red and actually win. It's not that common, maybe 30-70 uh, for us winning the game, but that's made up for against the Gates deck where it's like 99-1 in our favor. And that is the deck that we will be playing. And here we are for game 1. See what our opponent is playing in a minute. Okay, this hand, I am going to mulligan. We have 2 lands that come into play tapped, and we have nothing to smooth out our draw to make sure we land the Acuity. This we will keep. Hollow Fountain to start the game, and then we can draw or remove depending on what our opponent is playing. We do need more land, so we'll go ahead and leave that on top. And against what is probably a mono white life gain deck, these are going to be reserved for, most likely, a Johnny's Pridemates. Those are by far the most threatening card that the white-black life gain deck has. I misplayed my lands. Then now know we have something, but it doesn't matter that much. I'll go ahead and play the Revitalize instead. Now we kill the Pride Mate. If they have another one, then next turn we start off with a cast down. The Angel is a threat, but there are 2 turns before it actually becomes dangerous. So we're going to start off with the Acuity, see what we draw for land. If we draw another one, so next turn we get to play the Acuity first and then cast down one of their threats, letting us pick up both Acuities. So Acuity, draw a card, go up to 24 life, play a black source, cast down the Angel, and pick up both Acuities. Now our opponent has Herald of Faith. Yes, it does 4 damage. The other effect is entirely non-relevant against us. And at this point, I think it's more valuable just to get both Acuities on the field. As it stands, they can only take us back to 20, and we are not in danger of dying this turn. White Black doesn't have a way to suddenly come up with 20 points of damage on 5 mana. So we're going to start off with a cast down, get rid of the Herald. Again, pick up both Acuities. Play the first one. I assume our opponent has some kind of removal in hand. I doubt they're playing on full control the whole time. So the fact that it is delaying on their priority means that they have creature removal, which against us is entirely just a dead card. Go ahead and cast down. The idea is we are not actually trying to win the game. Against this opponent, they are going to gain enough life. It's just going to take a long time once we actually do draw an acquisition and start digging for threats. The main goal is just to run them out of stuff to do. Go ahead and murder. And I think based on... I'm only going to pick up one Acuity, just so we don't have to mess with discarding cards. Although we drew a land, which would have been entirely fine to discard anyway. Go ahead and lead off with a ritual. And there is the acquisition. Put both of those out, put that on tapped, see if they do anything. Ideally, we would like them to tap out for a big creature, just in case they have some kind of removal, which we are definitely assuming they do. So here comes the acquisition. Dig for something we have outside the game. And I think we are just going to get the Ethereal Absolution. It will wrath the board. You can see the main way this deck is going to win. We have 30, now 29, and they have 42. We have seen an extra 13 cards beyond what our opponent has. It's going to see if we hit a land, which we did. Now we're just going to start main phase, eating their graveyard and making threats. They are still on a 10 turn clock, so it's not exceptionally fast, but they are going to have a hard time actually getting damage into us at this point. Going to contempt the Pridemate. We're going to be clearing the mine soon anyway, so it doesn't necessarily matter what we discard at the end of turn, but it's probably going to be a couple of insights, or maybe a chemister's insight and a blink of an eye. The third Acuity, so now if we ever decide to, we can start earning a ton of value end of turn. Um, Having 3 Acuities on the field, basically every instant you cast during your main phase draws you between 3 and 5 cards and gains 6 life, which against a deck that is playing a lot of 2/2s, or their biggest creature they've played so far is a 4/3, it's going to take them a long time to get more than 6 damage a turn. Especially once we clear the mind and throw back in all of the removal we've used already. Just going to keep eating their creatures. And there's the concession. And I will be back with game two. And here we go with game two. Let's see what we get for an opening hand. We get to play first. We do not have a white source, but we do have two cast downs to get the early game under control. So we are going to go ahead and keep this, although having a white source would make this hand much better. And there it is. So we're going to play an island, that way we can get this on tap next turn. And with only one up, it could be Spell Pierce, but most likely not. Sultai, so we're probably going to see something like a Jade Light Ranger or another Explorer card. Um, Tap land. Okay, so we're ramping with Incubation Druid. That is a card that warrants a cast down. Yes, it is a 0-2 right now, but in a few turns it is a 3-5 threat, which could be annoying, and it could let them get out bigger things faster than we would like. No fifth land, which is kind of annoying. We do want another white source. Against a deck like this, they are most likely just playing a ton of creatures. And there's a Vivian. Okay, so we're just gonna keep digging, see if we can get another land. We didn't. And we will get rid of, let's see. We'll get rid of a ritual. We have a few other ways to draw cards. And our big thing is we are going to need to either wrath or hit removal of some kind. I would assume the Carnage Tyrant hits the field here. Okay, Grasses. That is an option. That is a better option for us because we get to cast down that. Go ahead and pass the turn back. So at this point, even if they do cast the Carnage Tyrant, it is still only a 4-turn clock, versus normally it would be 3. Right now, though, our option or our plan is if the Vivian gets close to her ultimate, we will blink of an eye. If not, the other option is eventually we'll hit one of our Vraska's contempts and answer it that way. So the Carnage Tyrant is definitely a threat, and it will demand Cleansing Nova to get rid of it, but we have plenty of turns before it's actually going to be able to kill us. So we're just going to keep digging for more land, and there's the Contempt. So next turn, this is going to be hitting Vivian, and we did manage to find our 6th land. So we gained 7 life that turn. So with this, we are now back to 28 again. And, okay, Branch Walker first. I would assume they, yes, left the thread on top. So they're probably going to explore that to the top twice. Yeah. Play our land for turn, and go ahead and get the board clean again. And now we can pass. So we still have 3 turns before this is really that threatening. And we have another Wrath in hand. So the plan here is we'll untap and Contempt, and then cast a Ritual or possibly a Clear the Mind, although I don't think we need to yet. So, with the Crassus, yes, it is a large threat, but against our deck, the Crassus is actually part of our win condition, since our primary goal is just to cycle clear the mines until our opponent decks themselves, or they just give up. That is the most likely win condition, is your opponent just conceding. Here we go. We found another one of our Acuities. So we have 7 mana currently. We can play the Acuity, and then if we hit an untapped land, the Cleansing Nova will empty the board for us. So, the big threat with this Sultai deck is they have actually seen more cards than us, and most of our cards, other than our removal, draws cards. So we played the Acuity, we hit an 8th land, and it came in untapped, so we get to Nova again. The biggest threat this deck can play against us is Vivian Reed. It gives so much incremental value that it can be really hard to deal with. As it stands, with this power on the field, they have a most likely 6-turn clock, but we have another 5 life gain, which would put us to 36, keeping it as a 6-turn clock, but we can still keep casting more cards after that. So we're going to Revitalize. Replay the Acuity. If we hit a black source, we get to murder the Walker, but we didn't. Oh, we already had 2. I am miscounting my lands. Murder the Wild Growth Walker. Go ahead and pick up the Acuity again. And now with the Carnage Tyrant, we have already played both of our Wraths. So the goal is we are either, if we hit the acquisition, then we can go get something like Eldest Reborn out of our sideboard, and that is an immediate answer to the Carnage Tyrant in conjunction with Contempt. This is 10 damage, it's still a 4-turn clock. It's not an immediate, we need to answer it now type of threat. We do still have time, and we're just going to go ahead and kill the Jade Light Ranger, get it off of the field, and this way we don't have to discard one of the cards in our hand. So now we're back down to 28. And you can see they have 28 and we have 29. We have caught back up on card advantage at this point. Or not really advantage, but cards seen. The big thing with playing this deck, I don't think they normally play many counterspells main deck. I have seen them run leaving something like this up as a Frilled Mystic, but I've only seen that once. Most of the time, any counter magic they have is going to be sideboard. So I'm just going to lead off with a Clear the Mind. See if we can hit a Wrath right off the bat. It's not overly likely, but it is possible. And if you say it, it always happens. That's just the way magic works. So next turn we get to lead off with an Acuity. If they play an exceptionally large and annoying threat, we can Contempt. But the Carnage Tyrant, yes, it is a big threat. It's not going to be killing us anytime soon. Go ahead and play the Revitalize. Just to emphasize the life gain here. And we're not pressed to really find a land at this point. So drawing the extra cards off of casting Chemister's Insight isn't relevant yet. We found another Acuity. We will play the Revitalize. Not going to pick up the Acuity. See what we draw. Ideally, we draw a land. Don't think we've played one yet this turn. We didn't. So now our discard options are either Chemister's Insight, because we don't need it that much, or Blink of an Eye. I think we're just going to get rid of the Insight, and then it's in our graveyard should we need to cast it later. So at this point in the game, it's still going to take 5 turns for that Carnage Tyrant to kill us by itself. The large Crisis to refill their hand is only digging us closer to eventually winning. Get our second Acuity out on the field. see what we draw. So we are going to cast down. We want to save the Contempt in hand, just in case they draw another Vivian Reed, so that we can answer it as soon as possible. Play Acuity. Hopefully we draw an untapped land. We didn't. So we are just going to go ahead and cast down the Wild Growth Walker and not pick up the Acuity. Because it still leaves us with we have to discard a card, which is just going to be an opt. Our opponent is down to 21 cards in library, and we are back up to 34. And one of those 34 is our answer to the Carnage Tyrant. Get the Acuity out. Cast down, not something we need here. Go ahead and opt. And we're going to pick up both of them. We can just replay them, and then we have enough stuff we can discard without losing any value. That is something we will definitely draw. Go ahead and play both Acuities again. Discard anything extra we get. There's not a need to play this quite yet, and they did leave up all of their mana, so there is potential that they have something that could get rid of it. But with the Clear the Mind, the only thing that truly gets rid of Mastermind's acquisition is either graveyard exiling effects, which would be annoying, or something like a Syncopate that would just exile it on cast. So there's the Vivian. We found our second Contempt, so we can go ahead and kill it. They killed one of our Acuities, but we still have the other one, and there's another one in here that we can still draw into. So we're going to open up with a Contempt. If they respond to this, we still have a second one, and I don't know that they will have enough counter spells to interact with two Contempts in the same turn. Go ahead and play an Opt. It leaves us 3 mana, so we can just pick up the Acuity and immediately replay it. We'll go ahead and draw a land. It'll get it out of our deck, which is one of the main goals here. Eventually, we're going to have about 30 cards left in our library and graveyard combined, and none of them will be lands. So everything we draw is either drawing us more cards or killing our opponent's stuff. I think I am just going to get rid of the duplicate Blink of an Eye. We still have Contempt and a Cast Down to get rid of any threats they play, or we could just play another Blink of an Eye and cycle through a card. I think here I'm just going to run out the acquisition, see if they interact with it. They didn't, so we don't have something in our sideboard that instantly kills the Carnage Tyrant, but what we do have is the Immortal Sun, which turns off any further Vivian reads and makes it so we no longer have to try to interact with them. It also just draws us more cards each turn, which never hurts when we're in a deck where we still have two Clear the Minds, so we can't actually deck ourselves. And it's not too bad to play it here. Um, Hostage Taker is annoying, and they can steal the Immortal Sun, which I assume they will, but because of Blink of an Eye, they steal it, and then they'll cast it, spending their mana for the turn, or at least some of it, and then we immediately get to bounce it back to our owner, to its owner's hand, which is us. So pre-combat, non-kicked because we don't have the mana, we'll take back our Immortal Sun. Go ahead and replay it. Cast down the Hostage Taker, pick up the Acuity again, replay the Acuity. Another land isn't great. We're going to go ahead and clear the mind ourselves just to spend our mana. See if we draw something good. And by good, I mean like a Revitalize, because Revitalize is a 1 mana cantrip that gains us life at this point because of the Immortal Sun. So yeah, that would have been better to lead with, because then we still could have had enough mana to replay the Acuity afterwards. And somewhere in our 38, we do have 2 Wraths, which are our primary way of getting rid of that. If not, and we find our acquisition first, we can just go get the Eldest Reborn and kill it, and then actually put a clock on our opponent, besides just you have 18 turns before you deck yourself. And there we go. Go ahead and play this now. Get the Carnage Tyrant off the field. Replay the Acuity. Revitalize. We only have 1 white source left, so we play the Revitalize, pick up the Acuity, replay the Acuity, and then we'll just be discarding lands most likely. And nothing else we need to play here. Go ahead and pass the turn. We have to discard 2 lands. Not a big deal. So with the Memorial to Folly, I think that's what my opponent is considering right now. They could regain the Carnage Tyrant. That's exactly what they're going to do. So they get it back. We still have multiple outs to this that we are continuing to draw to. So we played the first one of these. There is a second one, and again, acquisition for Eldest Reborn, easy way to get rid of it. So they're going for the Hostage Taker play again. We will respond the same way we did last time. Play out the Carnage Tyrant. And we blink of an eye. We can't play it kicked because it costs 2 mana, and even if we had the Immortal Sun, we only had 2 mana up. And the kicker wouldn't be reduced because it just adds to the total cost. Immortal Sun, because I saw it coming. Go ahead and play a Ritual. Pick up the Acuity, replay it, and then I think we'll just cast down the Hostage Taker. I think that leaves me enough mana. I'll do the math when I feel like it. Okay, so our opponent isn't doing the timeout. That is something you may run into with this deck. It just takes so long to actually kill your opponent, if you ever kill your opponent, that a lot of people, especially on Arena, will just let their timeouts run while they go make a sandwich. Based on what these Sultai lists normally run, I would expect he's got 4 or 5 removal spells in his hand now that are just completely dead against what we're doing. So there's a Crisis. He is down to 11 cards in his library. This is a 3-turn clock because we avoid it by 1. Go ahead and draw our 2 cards per turn now. Contempt the Crisis to pick up the Acuity. And 2 of our 25 remaining cards are answers to get rid of the Carnage Tyrant. He has not played another Memorial to Folly, so we shouldn't be at risk of him picking it back up again. He's already played 1 or 2 finds, and there's the concession. That is what this deck wants to do. Take its time and eventually kill them off. And in a minute, I will be back with game 3. And here we are for game 3. I think with the opt, that lets us keep this hand. We're probably just going to play this out tapped on turn 1, and then hope we draw a black source or an Acuity, something like that. Okay, so Godless Shrine, go ahead and play that tapped. And just so we can make the gameplay go faster, because this deck, as you saw in the last game, does take forever against opponents who don't scoop early, we are just going to, yeah, opt that main phase. So with this, that means they're probably playing Drakes or the Phoenix deck, the one LSV was playing at the Mythic Championship. And our best way, we do already have the answer in hand, is with Mastermind's Acquisition. When they get the Phoenixes, assuming we're not just dead instantly, we get to go get a Cry of the Carnarium out of our sideboard, which permanently exiles all of the Phoenixes, and we no longer have to worry about them. So they spell pierced our Acuity, which is annoying, but just to add insult to injury, I think we're going to go ahead and kill that, and then depending on what we draw next turn, maybe the turn after, we can clear the mind and put it back in. We still have two more that we are drawing to, and they've only played one threat. This deck doesn't have too many. Um, if they're playing just straight Drakes, they have 12. If they're playing Phoenix, it's a little more awkward to tell. We hit our land, gonna go ahead and pass the turn, and then end step Chemister's Insight. They have 5, so they can adapt the Pteramander already. Okay, in response to that, I'll go ahead and Insight. So we're taking 5. Gonna go ahead and try and kill it now. And it worked. So we're sitting at 16. We've already answered 2 threats. Okay, so that means they are just playing Drakes, which isn't too bad of a matchup for us. It is possible for them to just outright kill us in one turn. Go ahead and take the defenses down. We're at 16, so 3 burn spells is lethal. But they played Shock, and if they're sitting on like Lava Coils and Card Draw, those don't kill us. And right now we are just digging for removal. We don't have any 1-mana spells, so we'll just go ahead and play that tapped. And it's on our opponent to try and kill us this turn if they can. And it would seem that they can't. So cast down is exactly what we wanted. We already have a negate. So if they do have some way to protect it, if it's only 1, we can still interact. Okay, so multiple dive downs. Go ahead and let that resolve. because we want the cast down again. And we didn't hit removal, so now what we're going to do is clear the mind targeting our opponent. This makes it so that Drake is going to be a 0/4 when they untap. And because we shuffled everything back in, we have multiple wraths we're drawing to, both negates again. So we still have plenty of outs to this. So the shields are down. We can kill that one and take this action. And they have 3 spells in their graveyard. So we go ahead and replay this. Didn't hit a removal, so we're not 100% to win in this position. But they do need to be able to pump this and hit us with a burn spell to kill us this turn. So if their last card in hand is Shock, we're dead here. If it isn't, we're at 2, and we're going to regain another 6, so we'll actually be at more life than we went into this turn with. And we have enough to go ahead and play the Acuity. If we hit removal, that's fantastic. We did. They do not have an answer in hand. Go ahead and play our land for turn. Our opponent has no threats, 2 cards in hand. We did have to give them all of their spells back, but it kept us from dying. And we do still have this third clear the mind, so it's not like we're in a position where we're going to deck ourselves. And our opponent had it. So we have lost a match to Drake's. They got out on a pretty good start. So that takes us to 2-1, and I will be back with game 4. And for game 4, see what we're up against. So with this opening hand, I think we go ahead and keep it. We do have an opt and an anticipate to dig for our 3rd land. So I'm going to play the Catacomb first, and then untap opt if we don't immediately draw our next land. Which we did. So, going to play the swamp, pass the turn, and at their end step, anticipate, or depending on, okay, it's not mono blue. So, I don't think this is worth negating. not going to negate. I will wait until I see something more relevant than digging. Whatever it was, they liked it. And we'll take the second negate. We get to be more liberal with our use of negate now. Didn't play anything to negate, so we're going to opt. And we want another land. Ideally, it would be a blue source, but we'll make do with what we have so far. Go ahead and take the 2. They only have 2 cards in graveyard, so this can't get pumped yet. The Drake is annoying. Gonna go ahead and Insight. And there's an Acuity. Probably should have played the second blue source, but I think making it more difficult for them to get through lethal damage within a turn by playing the Revitalize is a little more important here. And there's a Wrath. So our discard is just going to be an opt. Hopefully they tap out to play something like a Crackling Drake, or they tap out to pump the Terramander. That lets us Wrath safely. But you can't always be lucky. I would assume they have interaction here. Or they don't. Go ahead and play your land. My guess would be if they were leaving mana open, they have something like Dive Down. But I found that not all of these decks are playing the full interaction suite. He's 1 mana short of pumping the Terramander right now. So when they untap, they will have that option. Going to go ahead and cast down. I would assume they have a dive down. Yeah. Pick up our Acuity. Go ahead and put that in tapped. And we've only played 1 Wrath and 1 removal spell, so we still have another 6 to hit. Multiple ways to dig for it. And if we ever feel like we are at risk, we can go ahead and negate something. A few of these decks are playing stuff like Ral main deck, and negate absolutely shuts that down. Okay, so putting a land and a lightning strike in the graveyard, I assume that means they are digging for interaction to try and keep the Pteramander safe. Go ahead and discard a land. So there's no phoenixes in here, which means either our opponent is just running bad, or they are just on the Drake's plan. So I think we're just going to try and get this off the table. We'll play the murder. No interaction. So we'll go ahead and continue with acuiting up some value. And this turn we are leaving the gate open. We could have played opt and bounce this, but then we would have to discard a card, and there's no reason to do that when they're not threatening to kill us. Going to go ahead and opt here. We've passed his combat step, so he can't just kill us out of nowhere with a maximized velocity. Gain some more life. And Cleansing Nova. Put that in tapped. So against Drakes, we've seen 2, 4, only 4 threats so far, and they're playing about 12. Depends on whether they're playing Nimzit or not. So here's where we definitely want another Cleansing Nova, but we don't have one. So we're going to clear the mind on ourselves. We didn't draw it, and we are officially dead on board. Let's see. No removal, which is rough. So if they have like a shock, we're just dead. And we're dead. Discard a couple of cards and let our opponent kill us. We are now at 2-2, both losses coming to Drakes. I will be back in a minute for game 5. Here we go for game number 5. This will be to see if we can break even with this deck or not. Okay, so this is going to be a mulligan. We can't actually cast any spell other than Blink of an Eye, and we can't cast it kicked, which is what we really want to be able to do. This is a much better hand. We have card draw into later card draw into more card draw. So hopefully we can get this done right. Go ahead and put that in tapped. Since next turn we're most likely just opting anyway, there's no reason to take the life loss. Cast down, which we can't actually cast. And go ahead and enter that tapped as well. Our opponent's on some red deck, but they haven't had instants, and they haven't actually cast anything in their 3 mana, so I'm not quite sure what's up. Okay, maybe some kind of blue-red wizards, or just mono-red wizards that doesn't start till turn 3. Some kind of big red deck. So Contempt would be better if we had a second black source. Hopefully we can hit one. In this situation, cast down wouldn't be too bad either, because that lets us kill something and replay an Acuity. We have to see what we draw. Okay, Blink of an Eye. So I think I'm just going to Blink of an Eye kicked to get rid of the Ogre since it doesn't have haste, and pick up the Acuity. This should eat most of our opponent's next turn in terms of what they have for mana. And hopefully we can draw a black source and actually permanently get rid of something. Okay, so they get in for 3, we go to 8, and with 5 mana, there is potential that we just get burned out, depending on what the 4 unknown cards are. We will have to see. Okay, so just an ogre, that is good for us. We're going to go ahead and contempt it, going back up to 10, and then we have negate in case they are on the burn to finish the game plan. Okay, so we're at 7, and our opponent shock. We'll let that resolve. Okay. So we'll play the Acuity. We have negate in case they try to burn us out while this is on the stack. They didn't, but we didn't hit another land, so we are just forced to pass the turn and see if they give us something to negate. Sparktron Dragon. That is interesting. And we are officially just dead. Didn't draw enough interaction. Only one removal spell drawn. And only one life gain spell. So again, some kind of big red deck, just not enough to close out the game. And that's going to be all for this series. Unfortunately, we went 2-3. Bit of bad running in the last game, and then Drake's is just a rough matchup because they can kill you out of nowhere. Significant number of games. So now that will be the end of this series. And I will be back in a minute with a wrap up. All right, so we ended the series 2-3. Not a great result. Ideally, we would have at least liked to get to 4 so we could get our gold investment back. Um, Overall, this deck is a ton of fun to play. Games can go on forever, as you saw with the Sultai match. Um, But against some decks, it's just either they kill you right off the bat, or you stabilize, and they have no hope of killing you from that point on. In terms of what I would do with this deck, obviously my lands are not as optimal as they could be. I just don't have all of the rare dual lands yet. Those would be something to add to this deck if you had them. Other changes, Blink of an Eye is okay sometimes. Against the Hostage Taker, Blink of an Eye was hilariously good. Just letting them cast Hostage Taker and then getting the Immortal Sun back as many times as I wanted. Negate is okay. The main goal of this deck is just to tap out for instants on your own turn. So Negate doesn't necessarily fit into that, but still having them is good against Control, which we didn't actually see a game against. Otherwise, the fourth Acuity is definitely something you want to be running. And then you could potentially cut something like the Chemister's Insight, um, maybe the Rituals for the other Revitalize, since Revitalize is cheaper, so it helps. It actually gains more net life than the Ritual of Rejuvenation does, simply because you can cast it for one less mana to replay Acuity easier. Um, the Mastermind's Acquisition, definitely something we want here. You could cut the third Clear the Mind. Main things that we saw that you would potentially want to add in are more removal and more wraths. If you had Kaya's, that would definitely be something to add in here. I don't on this account, so Cleansing Nova is simply what I have, and that's what I am sticking with for the time being. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.